Okay, my name is Dennis Packard, and just by way of introduction, I am a retired professor of philosophy and film. I taught at BYU for 40 years, and I love working with young people, and so I am quite happy working with you. Now, I'm going to share the screen right here, and this is the workshop we're getting into right now. So this is the submit workshop, and we've talked about the sharing of stories. We've talked about the writing of them. Now we're going to talk about submitting them. And this workshop has two parts. One is submitting your stories, and the other is submitting stories that you hear in various places. So I'm going to talk you through some things and then show it to you. So, so when it comes to submitting your stories, after you submit a first draft on your Inspire profile page with a title and tags, find it on Platza.com. Now I'm going to show you that in just a moment. And that will then take you to an edit page. And on that page, you need to add information about you and your story, including a photo and listing yourself as writer. And you can add any B-roll photos and video footage you have, whatever might be included in a video of your story, okay? So let's look at this. Here is the Inspire library right here. And then if you go to the profile page right here, then on this one right here, the number 3, submit a story, click here. That is right there where you can submit your story. And you put a title, you put some tags down here. We've talked a little bit about tags before, but tags about the challenge that was faced and the inspiration that was received and the result that occurred and the gospel principle that was learned. And then you just put paste in your story right there, and then you submit it. Okay, and now once that is submitted, you go to Platza.com, and here we are on that page right here. And I am coming in as if I was Elder Clark, and this is Elder Clark's story right here, lost in the woods and saved by God. So you find the story, because when you post it on Inspire, it throws it back into Platza. Okay.
And explain what Platza is, so they know
okay,
what they're looking.
So Platza is the background online movie studio that we've developed that pulls together a lot of the 20 years or so that I taught philosophy of film, and but it is servicing the Inspire library, which are these short pieces. So it's you go back into Platza to do work on it, and then it comes back out to the Inspire library. So we just showed you how you can get your story in to Platza, and now I'm going to click on this story of Elder Clark's, and here it is right here. So so there's various things that we need to fill in. So the story right here this is where Elder Clark would type his name in, put some contact information over here. It already has him listed as the writer and the story scout. The story scout because he was the one that put it in. Sometimes somebody might put in a story of somebody else's and they would be the story scout. So that's all in here. As we move along and we move towards videoing these stories, then we'll put a director in, a cinematographer, an editor, a composer, and so on. And you can also put viewers here that you want to come look at your story and respond to it. So right here is where you need to go pick an image. And a lot of times you could think of putting an image of yourself. If you have something when you were of the proper age, Elder Clark's story is when he was 10 years old. You could also, though, just go to Google Images and find an image there, and type in like "boy lost in the woods" and put it in. and it could be very, very effective. You want to click here on documentary.
Can I just mention something really quick there on that?
Yes, yes.
You might want to use something like Unsplash, if you've heard of that, because those are royalty-free images and you won't have people coming after you later. Some of those Google images are not, so they're copyright protected. So look at Unsplash and pick one from that. They're beautiful.
Okay, good. So you want to click that this is a documentary and that it's a short, and you want to make it public. And here, right here is where you put some B-roll. If you have some photos that could be part of the video, or you maybe have some footage when you were young, your dad got his camera out, or your mom and videoed you or something. Just put a URL here, maybe to a Google Doc or something there, okay? Now, this is where the story has been put in here. And by the way, you can grab a hold of this little part right there and pull it down like that and see the whole thing, okay? So, and this is where he has the story in here. And Roxanne has gone over this story and tidied up the grammar just a bit, but also put in some brackets, some detailed kinds of things that she would like to know a little more of. So let me just start this story. I think it's a wonderful story, and it's amazingly close. I was lost. I had tripped and fallen off the trail, rolling about 25 feet down the mountain. There I stood staring at the impossible climb back up. The sun was setting. A once comforting phenomena, meaning the sunset, now brought me terror.
That was the question I had, meaning the sunset?
You mean the sunset. A once comforting sunset now brought me terror. Do you see? That wouldn't take any more words, but it would give us more of the detail of exactly what was happening. So this is where you go in and you clean that story up. Now here's the story tags, and Elder Clark has put prayer, miracles, lost, and home. And by the way, the home part I find very touching. The image of that boy that was lost, and then he found himself back in. Now, I'm going to go on to the next slide and show you some other things that we'd like you to add into this. One is a summary of the story. This is sometimes called a pitch. They're sometimes called elevator pitches. It's like one sentence that tells your whole story. Facing this challenge, the main character is inspired to do this, and this happens as a result, which teaches the character this principle.
You know, Dennis, I think it'd be great if we went ahead and read the whole story, and then maybe we could ask people to, just work on it just one time, because we're going to work on it again. I know it takes some time, but I think that'll really cement it for us.
Okay, let me go. I want to show you something of how this is done here in the bullying story, okay? You remember that story? You saw it about a girl that was bullied at school, right? Raise your hands. You remember that story? Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to show you, here is how she summarized her story. Struggling to stop being bullied, Lita is inspired by scripture to pray for her bully, and he apologizes and becomes a friend, and she learns that scripture can answer our specific problems. And here is what we call the part of the story, which is a viewer hook. Girl struggles to stop being bullied. So when we go back to the slide presentation, this is what we want you to add a main line of action for your story. Beneath it, add a brief viewer hook about the challenge faced, which will be the Inspire Library title for your story. And then you fill out the scene summaries, separating your story into the main events of what you did and what happened, okay? So let's go back to the bully story. So here's how we summarize the scenes, so to speak. And part of what's important about this is some of these stories will be filmed essentially by just doing a documentary of somebody telling the story and a little bit of B-roll. Some of them will have reenactments in it. And you may set up these reenactments in different scenes. So here's the first scene. Lita cowers when a bully calls out her name in the hall, but he points her out and says unkind things to her. She wonders if he is just having a bad day, but he keeps bullying her. She wonders what she must have done to provoke him, but she can't figure out anything and just feels terrified and worried about even going to school. Now, those were the three kind of main things that happened before the moment of inspiration. She reads her scriptures, which she's done since she was 8, and realizes she needs to pray for her enemy. She prays for him every time he comes into her mind, which is often, but he keeps it up. So these little scenes are always something that you do, and then what happens as a result. She avoids him in the hallways and feels more peace, but he still keeps it up. And then here's the ending. She hardly knows what to say when he calls and apologizes, but she realizes the scriptures are a way that God helps us with our particular problems, and she becomes his friend. Okay, so that is the bullying story, how they did that. Now, let's go ahead and read this story here. Roxanne, would you go ahead and read it for us? I'm going to stretch this down just a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Elder Clark, good job, by the way. I am so proud of you for being the first and sharing this beautiful story. And I told you in the email, did you get my email saying that both Dennis and I were teary? That is the mark of a great story. So I'll read it aloud. And I just, like he said, I made just a few changes, and then I put some of these questions in here. I was lost. I had tripped and fallen off the trail, rolling about 25 feet down the mountain. There I stood staring at the impossible climb back up. The sun was setting. A once comforting phenomenon now brought me terror. I had run ahead of the group, and then I asked, was it a family reunion, a scout trip? This is something that he can go back in and fill in a little bit of details. On the way to watch the sunset together, but I made a wrong turn and ended up deep in the woods alone. I tramped through the trees full of growing fear. I searched for a way back to the trail and back to camp. Eventually, I was so feverish that I sat down on the ground crying, feeling more fear and dread than I had ever felt up to that point in all of my 10 years of life. I was freaked when I thought about how no one knew I had taken the wrong turn and ended up in this mess. Though I now see how silly it was, in my young mind, I truly thought I was going to die. In this moment of sheer terror, I knelt and in tears began to pray to my Father in heaven for help. I pled for forgiveness for my silly choice to run ahead and begged for help and deliverance from what I saw as certain death. I remember peace coming to my heart and a voice telling me to, quote, walk on. I worried whether moving around more would make it easier or harder to find me. I chose to trust in that peaceful feeling and went on, following a small trail I had discovered. My memory of the next bit is foggy, but I clearly remember walking through the woods and suddenly finding a paved road. I ran along it, knowing that it would lead me to people or at least to something other than trees. After a while, I made it to the end of the road and saw a sign saying Anaya Trail. After a few more steps, I found myself standing in the middle of our campsite right next to the fire pit. Everyone was stunned. And I asked, had they been looking for you? Did they know you were gone yet? When the camp director questioned me later on how I had made it back, I explained that I had found my way to a trail called Anaya Trail that took me right to the center of camp. I even showed him where I had entered. He seemed a bit shocked. He had never heard of Anaya Trail before. That day, in a rather humbling experience, I learned that God watches over us. Not only can he bring us peace, but if it is his will, he can literally bring us home. And the crowds go wild. Wonderful, Elder Clark. Okay, what did he do great in this story? I want to hear from other people, and then we'll go on and do this. I just want to hear from you what you were like, oh, he did that right because of what we learned in the writing workshop.
Well, I saw immediately you started writing the action
Yes.
of falling.
Yep. Right in that first sentence, he did that. What else was good about the story?
It was kept short as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What else? Any other thoughts? Could you picture it?
Yeah.
Could you feel for this 10-year-old kid who sat down crying? So he was able to evoke emotion. He was able to draw a picture in your head of this overexcited kid running up a trail and then taking a wrong turn, hoping for a happy experience and all of a sudden finding himself in a terrifying experience. And then even him walking back into camp, I think he did a great job talking about, boom, he was all of a sudden there. He didn't even remember what happened, but he had found his way back and they were shocked. So the other thing I think you did really great at, Elder Clark, was that day, this is his whole ending, that day in a rather humbling experience, I learned that God watches over us. Not only can he bring us home, but if it's his will, he can not only can he bring us peace, but if it's his will, he can bring us home. You did it in one sentence. We probably could have broken that into two now that I'm looking at it again. But the point is that you didn't beat us to death with it. You didn't lecture us on that. You just said, this is what it was, and this is what he can do. And of course, members of the church, we understand even more so what home means, right? So anyway, excellent job. Thank you so much. All the stories that came in were so varied and excellent. So let's go ahead now and let's do this, what you had done with the Lita's story, and let's start to fill it out, but then we can
So if we were to fill this out, struggling to get home, lost in the woods, or lost in the woods trying to get home, right? Something like that. Jack is inspired to do what? What was he inspired to do? He's inspired through prayer to walk on, right? And he manages to find himself back to the camp, which teaches Jack the principle that God is aware of us and can actually bring us back home. And right, something like that. That's just a rough draft. And what would a viewer hook be? Well, viewer hook based on the line of action. And all we want to know is about the problem.
lost in the woods.
Boy lost in the woods. That's enough.
Okay.
Okay. Then now here for the scenes down here.
Let's let Elder Clark answer these.
Okay, so we don't need to go through all of them, but we can do a few of them. And if you need more, you see, you can just click on the plus right there, boom, and it puts you another one. Or you can say, I don't need that one right there. I'm going to take it off. Okay. But and these are not sequences, they are scenes. Okay. So the main character tries to do this, but this happens. So what is the first part? The main character.
Elder Clark, you're on.
I'm not sure. Would you treat the scene as, because I feel like the beginning part is sort of just setting it up in a way.
Yeah, well, it's the first part of what's happening in the story. So if we go back up here to what the first thing is, I had tripped and falling, rolling about 20. There I stood, impossible to climb back up. Okay, so the main character tries to
See his
figure out tries to figure how to get back out, but he can't climb back out again from where he fell. Right, that's the first part of your story. What's the second part?
Let's see. There's a bit of searching around, and then the prayer.
So I cried, feeling that I was going to perhaps die. Are you trying to figure out how to get out? I was freaked about how no one knew I had taken the wrong turn. I knelt down and it's actually, you're into the prayer. You're into the second part. The main character tries to get inspiration about what he needs to do and what happens. You're told to walk. To walk on. Okay. And so you walk on and you can hardly remember what happened, but you get there right to the site. And then you, when you're asked what happened, you can't really explain. But anyway, you see, you can fill those in. So these are scenes. What happens? So you're taking a 1-sentence summary called a pitch, and you're expanding those out into 3 summaries of little scenes that we see. And they're always of something that you do, but there's a problem. Something you do, and there's a problem. And then, but at the end, and then what happens at the end, it right here is, and you realize that gospel principle. Okay.
So that's a sequence. Dennis, explain that. So you have a scene, and then you end with a sequence.
No, those should be scenes as well. Those are
Oh, I
scenes, are sequences are like groups of scenes, but they're all just scenes
Okay.
that we're seeing there. And if we were reenacting this, we would show the boy at the bottom trying to not see how he can get up, while the voiceover is going and so on. Okay, now let's go back to the slides. So so this says now you do it. Let's see. No, here is okay. Now the last part is we want you to answer the review questions for your story and submit your story for peer review by your group leader so it can be discussed at the beginning of the next workshop. Revise your story according to your review feedback, including filling in details requested in square brackets. Submit your story for staff review and revise it until it is approved. So what that means here is in your story down here, here are some, let's see now, where do I get back down here?
You're on the wrong
On
story.
the wrong one. I'm back on this one. Okay, here are review questions for these, and you first review it yourself. Does the story tell about someone facing a challenge and being inspired and learning about a principle? Yes, definitely. Right?
Yep.
Does the story bring out the details of what's happening? Well, you could say definitely after you fill in those little square brackets, okay? And it just works you down through these little review questions, okay? And then you click right down here and it says submit for peer review. And then it will get reviewed. And your peers right now are Roxanne and me. It will come to us. And we are, and then once it comes in, then it will say staff. And we count as staff right now as well. But once you get into this, you are going to be peers and you're going to be reviewing stories and making comments and suggestions on people's stories to help them get them ready. So let me go back to this now. And that is the end of what you have to do with your story, okay? Now, the next part is what are you going to do to help someone else?
Dennis, I'm sorry to interrupt you
Yes.
again, but can we just go back to the slide 2 above? Just where your stories, back to the slides.
Okay,
Not
right here.
now. Does anybody have any questions at this point? We're going to walk you through it again. Elder Bergloff, did you see my email about using your story? Are you okay with that?
I just got that. That's sure that works.
So good. Okay, we'll do that. But is there any other questions before we move on?
So the first thing for you, Elder Bergloff, is to put that story into the library thing that will then bring it into Platza. And
So
then
we'll help you do
just
that.
like this. So we'll help you do that.
Yeah.
Okay, now, once you've done your story, then you are ready to help other people with their stories. And I tell you, I promise you that these stories will start appearing all over the place. You'll hear them all the time. You'll be at dinner someplace and you'll hear somebody tell one of these stories, and certainly you'll hear them at church. So help someone else write a story of inspiration you hear at church or elsewhere, like from someone tracked out or someone less active. Use the same steps you followed for your story and list yourself as Story Scout when it goes in. Create a group for those you're helping with stories. Now, this is the new part. Click on the profile icon in the upper right on Platza.com and then on My Groups and arrange to show those in your group the writing video and review stories with them that they post in the library. Okay, so let me give you this one. So here is Elder Clark's page, okay? And if I go up to his profile right up here and then I go to My Groups, then it's going to post, it's going to pull up a group that we've kind of started for him. And what you'll have is just like the one that you've seen for us. You'll say, here's the workshop location or a URL, and say you have 3 or 4 writers that you've heard their stories and you've got them in there and you want to talk You want to work with them and help them. You say, I heard that wonderful story, and I'm having a little meeting here, and would get some of you together, and you put the date on it and the duration and a reminder kind of a thing. And there's Elder Clark's name. You put it on the plus, and it puts somebody else's on here as well. Okay. You can put as many as you want in there. And then you can arrange to meet with them and show them that video that we saw last time of Roxanne explaining about what the story needs to be like. And then they can start working on that story. And you can just post on the Inspire library just something really bare bones about the story. It was a story about something like this is what I remember. And then they could work on it in more detail. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Are you guys feeling overwhelmed? Don't feel overwhelmed. We're going to hold your hand through this, okay? I know it's a lot of clicking and pointing and seeing things for the first time, but we're going to help you through this. Really, what we were wanting to do today is just show you how to submit a story and fill it out. So it's got all of those scenes and the tags and all of that, so it's ready to go. We're trying to create something that, as this grows and expands around the world, that's very much automated, that it's not just coming to Roxanne's email, you know, that it's something that can be handled and other people can log in and work on together. So, all right, you guys feeling good? Give us the thumbs up if you are okay. Oh, good.
Okay, good. So
Okay.
I'm gonna stop the recording.